For the next part of this lesson, we are going to learn a very important property. It's one that you will use for the rest of the school year, so please learn it and don't forget it. It all begins with a definition: linear pair. A linear pair is a pair of adjacent angles whose non-adjacent sides are opposite rays. In other words, the non-adjacent sides, ray DC and ray DA, form a straight line. And this is our very important property, the linear pair property. It says that if two angles form a linear pair, then they are supplementary. This makes sense because the non-adjacent sides form a straight line or a straight angle. That makes the angle measure 180 degrees. Therefore, the measure of angle BDC plus the measure of angle BDA has to equal 180 degrees. So by definition, they are supplementary. Okay, let's pull all of this together so far with this single problem. What can you conclude from the figure and why? The first thing that I notice is right here with angle 1 and angle 2. Notice the arcs. That tells us that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because of the marks. We also know that angle 3 and angle 5 are vertical angles by their definition. Their sides are opposite rays. Next, what else can we figure out about this figure? Well, I noticed that angle 3 and angle 4 are adjacent angles, but not just any sort of adjacent angles. They form a linear pair, and that is also by definition. But let's not stop there, because notice what we have with angle 4 and angle 5. The exact same thing. So angle 4 and angle 5 are also a linear pair by definition. And if we want to go on and on with this, let's see, angles 3 and 4 are supplementary because of the linear pair property. We can say the same thing about angles 4 and 5. They are also supplementary by the linear pair property. Moving back to angles 1 and 2, if we look at this ray right here, let's give it a name, shall we? Let's call it AB. So ray AB bisects the angle made up of angles 1 and 2. Let's also give that a name. Shall we call that CAD? So ray AB bisects angle CAD. And that is by definition as well. I'm sure that there are plenty more things that you can conclude from this figure as well. If you have any questions, make sure you write them in your notes so you remember to ask them in class. Now, before we turn you loose to do some of this on your own, we want to emphasize that there are some relationships that you can assume to be true without any marks on a figure, and others that you cannot assume to be true. They would be very bad. So here is our list. It is safe to assume the following: that points, particularly 3 points, are collinear, especially if there happens to be a line drawn through them. That angles are adjacent. That adjacent angles form a linear pair. You saw that in the last example with angles 3 and 4 and angles 4 and 5. That angles are vertical angles, or their sides are opposite rays. What appears to be a line is a line. Now let's talk about some things that are not safe to assume. It is not safe to assume that angles or segments are congruent. It is not safe to assume that an angle is a right angle. It is not safe to assume that angles are complementary. And finally, it is not safe to assume that angles are supplementary unless they are a linear pair. And now it's your turn to do some problems on your own. When you're finished taking notes, click the button below.